President Trump's Ukraine Victory Fund scheme might actually be brilliant. Is this actually a tool that's going to lever the Chinese and Russians to stop the war in Ukraine? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is actually kind of a great plan. Trump is pitching a victory fund for Ukraine. He says he's going to create a fund, or proposing a fund, for weapons for Ukraine bankrolled by tariffs on China. But there's a catch. You see, Trump has said that, well, the Europeans have to get on board to do it. And after Trump was humiliated by Putin in Alaska, where Trump promised he could totally get Putin to stop his war if he only just rolled out the red carpet for the guy, but instead he sort of humiliated the U.S. military and the U.S. in general by extracting no concessions from Putin and still treating him like he was a big shot. So the solution that Trump is proposing, now I want to bear in mind, Trump has proposed dozens of different strategies to end the war in Ukraine, ranging from total Ukrainian capitulation to total Russian military defeat. And so, of course, he's done very, 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 very few meaningful actions. But what's fascinating is that we're seeing now that from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth saying, quote, President Trump has instructed the ambassador and myself to tell the European allies that we'd be in favor of a Russian oil tariff or a Ukrainian victory tariff on China. Oh, sorry, this is Scott Bessent telling reporters. He said, but our Ukrainian or European allies have to be willing to join and follow. We will respond to our European partners if our European partners will join us. This strategy is a 500% tariff on imports from China, with the money generated being used on weapons for Ukraine's military. The plan is designed to put maximum economic pressure on Putin, whose war machine is entirely reliant on Chinese support, to come to the negotiating table with Trump and Putin. Diplomatic sources in Washington told The Telegraph that the idea of sanctioning China over its purchase of Russian oil had faced roadblocks from European governments. Beijing is called a decisive enabler of Russia's war by NATO nations, but many other members of the alliance state, including Britain, refused to brand it an enemy. And we've talked about the fact that the Chinese have been really trying to make diplomatic inroads in with the Europeans. And on one hand, this 500% tariff would absolutely put the screws to China to, in turn, stop enabling Russian aggression, to say, listen, Russia, you have to at least stop the war of aggression and come to the negotiating table and enact a ceasefire. And again, I really sometimes fail to understand why Vladimir Putin, who has at least partially achieved his strategic objectives by annexing Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, parts of Zaporizhia and parts of Kherson provinces, continues to try to, in his mind, break the Ukrainian government, and in turn, he thinks break NATO. Again, the only way it makes sense is if Russia has larger designs on NATO in general, and he believes that if he can crack the Ukrainians, that NATO will capitulate pretty easily. That's actually not a crazy assessment. But the fact is, China, because this is hopefully going to be something that never actually has to get implemented. The idea would be that destroying basically all Chinese markets the threat of it would be sufficient to get China to go to Russia and say, listen, if you want to continue with this economic partnership, you really have to stop this. You have to stop this madness. Now, the Chinese are basically calculating that they have more economic leverage over Europe than Europe does, and that these 500% tariffs would actually damage Europe more than they would damage China. I am not sure that's entirely the case, but again, when asking about Zelensky's plea for Tomahawk missiles, Trump said, yeah, he was considering other options. I'll make a determination if Ukraine is allowed to go offensive with the Tomahawks. It doesn't make any sense. And as we've talked about, at some point, you have to just the idea that Russia retains any kind of deterrence is comical. Remember, or that Russia has the right or that there's escalation fears is comical. Like, when Putin brought in North Korea to the fight, did anyone worry about him escalating? Did anyone talk about the language of escalation? No. People said Vladimir Putin just does it. And it's a classic, it's a classic bully tactic to say, when I do it, when I escalate, it's because I'm just like that. Of course, it is logical and normal for Putin to escalate because he has a long pattern of escalating, right? From annexing Crimea, annexing the Donbas, invading Georgia, right? There's systematic escalations that have occurred. And so we say, we simply accept that Vladimir Putin is always going to escalate, but it's on the West to not. Sort of like saying, hey, an aggressive dog is going to bite people, but you're a bad person if you kick the dog away from your kid, right? Because you're the person and the dog is the dog. But that doesn't make any sense. So somehow this idea that Trump goes, well, we don't want to make him angry. It's like, maybe we should be angry. Maybe the West should be angry, given the amount of capitulation we've done to Vladimir Putin. So again, when I see statements like this, I think, he's not that serious, right? He's talking, he's pitching things that the Europeans will never do. And because the Europeans will never do it, he gets to go, well, I would have, but the Europeans said no. I think there's a pretty good chance of that. Now, what's interesting is that, again, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth suddenly sounds a lot like us. He says, quote, if there's anything we've learned of the President Trump's active application of peace through strength, you get peace when you are strong, not when you use strong words or wag your finger. You get it when you have strong and real capabilities that adversaries respect. Now, I want to be clear. At no point have we leveraged peace through strength. You could maybe argue the Iran-Israel war, where the U.S. intervened on the side of Israel, becoming a belligerent. Did that coerce Iran to stop? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that was the decisive factor. Again, the Israelis pretty quickly achieved basically air dominance over Iran earlier in the war, and I think Iran really was embarrassed by that. But nonetheless, I think the principle is generally true, and this certainly applies with Vladimir Putin. Right? Hegseth later added, quote, now, if this war does not end, if there is no path to peace in the short term, then the U.S., along with our allies, will take steps necessary to impose costs on Russia for its continued aggression. Right? And again, the thing that's aggravating is that I think he's exactly right, but that he has taken months to come here, to get here. This is what we, the Europeans, the Ukrainians, again, those of us on this channel, calculated about Russia, understood about Russia from the jump. And the fact that tens of thousands of Ukrainians have been killed because President Trump had some other conception of peace, somehow peace through kissing the aggressor's ass, is sort of pathetic. But, hey, he got here. He got here, and that counts for something. Anyway, guys, thanks to our Colonel tier members. Guys like Fran Zacharias, Thomas Anderson, Eugenia Cuesta, Sergei Zinchenko, Alan Knutson, Alfred Jeske, and all of our Lieutenant tier members. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.